They were last seen walking toward the water, hand in hand, as the tide rolled in like it always had. It was June 21st, 1987, summer solstice, and the beach was quiet by sunset. No crowd, no noise, just one couple, a warm breeze, and a horizon that swallowed them whole. They never came back. No footprints in the sand. No belongings left behind. Not even a note in the car they parked just steps away. And 27 years later, a fisherman pulling up crab traps off the Carolina coast made a discovery buried beneath the waves. A rusted chain, a lockbox, and inside, their names. Welcome to Uncommon Stories. If this story stays with you, hit subscribe and tell me where you're watching from and when the truth found you. Now let's begin. The town of Elm. Hollow wasn't known for tragedy. It was a quiet place, wrapped in dunes and Spanish moss. Locals lived slow. Tourists came for sunsets, not stories. But in the summer of '87, that changed. The couple's names were Daniel and Marissa Clay, newly married. No kids, no criminal history, no debts. They'd moved to Elm Hollow from Atlanta just 2 months earlier, bought a cottage near the coast, worked from home, a quiet life, no drama. Marissa was a painter. Daniel wrote for a regional magazine. Together, they were warm, polite, almost forgettable, and that's what made their disappearance so strange. June 21st. They'd spent the day on the beach. Neighbors saw them leaving around 5 p.m., towels over their shoulders, Daniel carrying a small cooler. They smiled at the older woman who lived 2 houses down, waved at the local bartender, who always sat outside after his morning shift. Normal, simple, nothing strange. They never returned. At first, no one panicked. It wasn't unusual for couples to go out for a night drive, to take the boat across the bay, to sleep under the stars. But the next day, their car was still parked by the dunes, sand still clinging to the tires, keys inside, and in the passenger seat, Marissa's wedding ring. Police were called. A search was launched. Dozens of volunteers scoured the shoreline. Dogs were brought in. Helicopters searched offshore. Nothing. No bags. No blood. No signs of struggle. The only clue? A single set of footprints, leading toward the water, not away from it. They were never found. No bodies. No ransom. No suicide note. Just silence. The media dubbed it the Elm Hollow vanishing. But interest died quickly. Without evidence, there was nothing to chase. For years, it stayed a local ghost story. The kind teens whispered around bonfires. A cautionary tale for couples walking too far after dark. But not everyone forgot. Marissa's sister, Ivy, never gave up. She returned every year to the beach where they vanished, walked the same path, left flowers on the shore. In a 2009 interview, she said, something about it never felt accidental. It wasn't the ocean. It wasn't a storm. It was like the beach swallowed them on purpose. And then, on July 3rd, 2014, a fisherman named Ellis Grant pulled his trap too close to the inlet rocks. The net snagged. When he hauled it up, there was a rusted metal box tangled in the chain. Old, heavy, sealed with 2 clasps, corroded shut. He brought it home, took a crowbar to the hinges, and inside, water-damaged photographs, 2 wedding bands, one etched D+M always, and a piece of canvas, sealed in wax, painted in a style Ivy would later confirm as her sister's work. On the back of the canvas was a name, Ransom Cove. No such place existed on any modern map. The box was taken in by police. Media swarmed. New clue in 1987 beach disappearance. Fishermen may have found evidence in long-forgotten case. The item that shocked investigators most wasn't the rings or the painting. It was a Polaroid tucked behind the canvas. A photo warped from moisture, but still clear enough to see. Two people, Daniel and Marissa, standing on a beach. But it wasn't Elm Hollow. The sand was darker. The trees behind them weren't local. And in the corner, a hand, resting on Daniel's shoulder, belonging to someone just outside the frame. The photo had a timestamp, August 4th, 1988. 1 year after they vanished, the search was reignited. The story resurfaced. And what followed in the next few months would unravel everything people thought they knew about the couple, about the town, and about the place once called Ransom Cove. Because when Ivy returned to Elm Hollow that summer to identify the box, she walked to the shore one last time and noticed something strange. A section of the dunes had eroded, new sand exposed, and in the wet layers of earth, a set of stairs. Old wood, buried, leading downward. What lay beneath would change the story forever. Because it wasn't just where they vanished. It was where others had vanished before. And the deeper she went, the more she realized her sister hadn't run. She'd been taken. The stairs were buried beneath 2 decades of sand. Old wood, warped and rotting, covered in sea salt and time. Most people would have walked right past them. But Ivy, she noticed, because something about that dune had always bothered her. It was too perfect, too symmetrical, like someone had shaped it, not nature. So when the tide pulled away the topsoil and revealed those first 2 steps, she didn't hesitate. She called no one. She didn't wait. She went down. Beneath the dune, there was a hollow, small, damp, but real. The air was thick with brine and mildew. And deeper in, she saw what looked like stone, not beach rock, but brick, a wall, hand-laid, mortared shut, and carved into one corner. Faint and trembling were initials, D+M. She froze, and that's when she knew they had been here. She returned with police the next morning. Excavation began slowly. Too slow. The press swarmed. Speculation returned. What was under the beach? Why hadn't it ever been found? What was Ransom Cove? Old town records were pulled. And that's when the story changed again. Because Elm Hollow used to be 2 towns. One that lived, and one that didn't. Before 1952, there was a separate coastal settlement just north of Elm Hollow. A few cabins, a harbor, a church. It was called Ransom Cove. But in the late 1950s, after a series of unexplained disappearances, mostly tourists, the town was evacuated and the land sold back to the state. Official reason? Unsafe foundation. Erosion risk. But locals always whispered another theory. That Ransom Cove didn't sink. It was buried. On purpose. A town wiped off the map. Homes pulled down. History bulldozed. And over the years, the sand took the rest. What was left behind was silence. Until now, the wall beneath the dune was broken open. And what lay behind it was not ruins. It was a room, dry, intact, hidden. Inside, 2 chairs, an old oil lantern, a melted candle, and a suitcase. Marissa's initials were on the handle. The suitcase held clothing, 2 notebooks, a pair of sunglasses, and a piece of paper folded and sealed with wax. On the seal was a symbol, a circle with a single eye inside. It wasn't a brand. It wasn't from any known organization. It looked handmade. The note was a letter, addressed to no one, written in Marissa's handwriting. If someone finds this, it means the room still remembers. We were told the beach would reset every 27 years. We were told we'd be forgotten. But memory doesn't rot like wood. It stays. It waits. Daniel is gone. I think they took him under. I stayed because I was afraid. Afraid of what the water would do if I tried to leave. But if you're reading this, maybe it didn't work. Maybe the tide failed to erase me. I was real. We were real. And this place, it was built to make us disappear. The letter ended with one more line. Asked about the children. They were first. It was the only record Marissa ever left behind. No second page. No signature. And it was dated August 2nd, 1989. 2 years after they were declared missing. Police expanded the dig. What they found wasn't one room. It was a series of them. Buried chambers. Connected by narrow halls. Collapsed in places. No windows. No exits. And in the center of it all, a door. Steel. Locked. With a phrase etched into frame. Echo only. What did it mean? Who wrote it? And how long had this been here? Ivy was interviewed again. She didn't cry. She didn't speculate. She just said, I told you she didn't leave. Historians and journalists began tracing the roots of Ransom Cove. What they found was buried deeper than expected. Old census documents showed the town had lost 36 people between 1946 and 1950. No cause of death. No relocations. Just gone. And before it was buried, Ransom Cove was home to a private retreat, a facility known only as the Echo House. No one knew what it had been used for. Its records were sealed. The building demolished with the rest. But a forgotten directory in the Charleston archive listed one strange detail. It wasn't a rehab center, or a hospital, or a school. It was filed as Memory Containment Unit. That term had no precedent, not in psychological records, not in architecture, not in town archives. It wasn't medical. It was something else. And then came the phone call from a woman in Asheville, elderly, shaky. She said her name was Florence. She had seen the news. She had a photograph. One she said had been tucked into her Bible for 50 years. It showed 5 children, standing in front of a sign. The image was faded, but just clear enough to read. Echo House, Ransom Cove, 1947. One of the girls looked like Marissa, but it couldn't be. Marissa wasn't born until 1962. Florence swore she remembered the girl, said she was quiet, drew pictures of tunnels, always said she was waiting for her brother. She called herself Mira, a name no one else used. But when Ivy saw it, she remembered something from her childhood, a name Marissa used in the margins of her sketchbooks, a name she never explained. A name she wrote in the corners like a secret only she was allowed to keep. Mira, a buried town, a sealed room, a letter, a name that didn't belong, and a timeline that refused to make sense. The past wasn't past. The couple hadn't just vanished. They'd gone backward, or been taken, into something older than the beach itself. And as the final chamber was uncovered beneath the sand, the truth that had waited 27 years began to rise like the tide, because what lay behind that steel door wasn't just a body. It was a camera, still intact, still loaded, and what it had recorded would unravel the final days of Daniel and Marissa Clay. The camera was old, black, weathered, but sealed in a steel case. A miracle it survived. Even more so, a miracle it still functioned. Inside the metal housing, one analog tape, labeled in handwritten ink. Echo final entry. The FBI took it, but not before Ivy saw a single freeze frame on the tech's laptop. It showed a hallway, concrete walls, bare bulbs, and at the far end, a door, painted red, and in the lower corner of the frame, 2 bare feet. They played the footage in a secure lab. The first few minutes were blank. Darkness, shuffling sounds. Then the video shook. The camera had been picked up, and someone whispered, "We're not supposed to record." The voice was Daniel's. The camera turned, revealed his face in dim lighting, pale, sweating. He looked thinner than he did in the last known photograph. His hair was longer, his eyes sharper. He wasn't afraid. He was determined. He whispered again, "She doesn't know I took this. If you're watching, help her remember." The footage cut to Marissa. She sat on a cot in a narrow room. Plain walls. No windows. Just a speaker in the upper corner. Blinking red. She stared at it, unblinking, and whispered softly, "It's 7 a.m. The water is calm. I made tea. Daniel is working in the shed." Then again, mechanically, "It's 7 a.m. The water is calm. I made tea." Over and over. Daniel whispered from behind the camera. They call it looping. They said it helps her stay stable. But she wasn't unstable. She remembered too much. So they gave her script. The camera cut again. Different hallway. Dimmer now. And a new sound, faint hum, like wires buzzing deep underground. Then a figure moved past the frame. Fast. Barefoot. Gone. Daniel whispered, "That's subject 9. He doesn't talk. Just stares at the walls. I think he's been here longer than us." The hallway opened into a chamber. Cement floors, wires overhead, and a mural on the far wall, painted in a childlike hand. A house, a beach, and a girl standing alone, staring out at a wave. Beneath it, scrawled in charcoal, "Don't let them wash it away." Then came the voice, not from the camera, from the speaker above. Female, flat, mechanical, loop integrity declining. Subject 7 unstable. Begin reinforcement. The lights flickered, and Daniel backed away. His breath quickened. He turned the camera on himself again. They said it was voluntary, that we came here to escape the noise. But this place, it's not for peace. It's for forgetting. He turned the camera off. The FBI wouldn't release the rest of the tape to the public, but investigators revealed that it contained nearly 30 more minutes of footage. Most of it captured wandering through the underground structure. More rooms, more speakers, chairs bolted to floors, walls lined with paper, hundreds of drawings, most childlike. One investigator said, "It wasn't just a bunker. It was a theater. Every room had a role." In one section, Daniel stood over a terminal. Green screen. No keyboard. And on the screen, a single line repeated. Echo running. Memory pass active. Subject 7, 9, 11. The numbers weren't names. They were loops. Loop 7, Marissa. Loop 9, unknown. Loop 11. That one would come up again. One room in the video disturbed agents the most. It had mirrors. Not on the wall. On the ceiling. The bed was clean. The speaker still blinking. And on the bedside table, a stack of white index cards. Each card had a sentence. The water is calm. Daniel is working in the shed. I made tea. Everything is okay. They were the same phrases Marissa had repeated earlier, not from memory. From cue cards. She wasn't reliving. She was reading. At the very end of the tape, the final 90 seconds, Daniel set the camera down, pointed it at himself. He looked exhausted and said, "If this is found, please don't bury it again." They took her because she remembered the wrong day. Said the loop couldn't hold. Said she was contaminating the other subjects. She's still Marissa, but she thinks her name is Mira now. That's how they trick you. They don't erase you. They rename you. He paused, looked off camera. then turned back. Ransom Cove didn't die. It was repurposed. Ask about the eye. Ask about Loop 11. They said he never left. The screen cut to static. The media, of course, only got a few scraps. But Ivy saw the full thing. And when it ended, she walked outside, stood in the sand where her sister once vanished, and whispered, "You were right. The beach does remember." Investigators reclassified the Clay disappearance as a federal case. An inquiry into covert memory experiments was launched. Quietly, no names were given, no arrests made. Only one internal file leaked in the following months. A page marked, Echo Initiative, Abandoned Facility Inventory. It listed 6 sites. 5 crossed out. 1 left. Ransom Cove. Site 3. Status, stabilized. Comments, Loop 7 complete. Loop 9 missing. Loop 11 still transmitting. But that raised a terrifying question. If Site 3 had been deactivated, why was Loop 11 still transmitting? And who or what was still listening? In the weeks after the footage leaked, a quiet dread settled over Elm Hollow. The kind that doesn't scream, doesn't panic. It just waits in the corner and listens, because the town knew now. The beach hadn't just taken a couple. It had been designed to. The government stayed silent. But something changed behind the scenes. Locals noticed unmarked trucks near the shoreline, drones over the dunes, surveyors that never gave names. And Ivy Clay? She went dark. Friends said she moved in with a relative out west. Others claimed she was put in witness protection. But one message surfaced from her private email. Never sent, never addressed. Just saved as a draft. Loop 11 is watching. The phrase made no sense. But then a breakthrough came. From an unlikely place. A retired nurse named Lorraine Faulkner came forward. She'd worked in coastal facilities throughout the 60s and 70s, mostly in Carolina asylums, which she now believed were tied to echo sites. She didn't know the word loop, but she remembered something else. Every couple of years, she said, a man would show up with a patient. No name, no history. They said he was ex-military, but he looked too thin, too still. He wore a badge with an eye on it, and he called the patient his mirror. She swore she saw that man again in 1991, not in a hospital, but in a photograph on the cover of a local news bulletin about missing persons. It was Daniel Clay. But Daniel wasn't military. He wasn't government. He was a freelance writer from Atlanta, right? Unless he wasn't. Investigators reopened Daniel's employment records, and a pattern emerged. Before settling in Elm Hollow with Marissa, Daniel had worked under 4 different aliases in 3 states. Each time, brief stays. Each time, writing assignments tied to remote areas. Each time, disappearing after 18 to 24 months. One alias, Thomas Elridge, had a connection. A published article from 1984 in a little-known journal titled Memory Echoes in Environmental Isolation, written under a pseudonym, but the byline was familiar. T. Elridge, Research Assistant R. Cove Archive, R. Cove, Ransom Cove. It appeared Daniel wasn't just a victim. He may have been involved. Or worse, he may have brought Marissa there. The timeline blurred. The idea that Daniel and Marissa were a newlywed couple swept away by the sea no longer made sense, because someone found a receipt, dated 1985, 2 years before their disappearance. It was a motel record from southern Georgia. 2 names, signed Mira Jameson and T. Elridge, and in the comments section, onward to Echo. The realization hit hard. Daniel Clay and T. Elridge were the same, and Marissa May have gone by Mira long before she forgot who she was. But why the deception? Why vanish together? And what happened between them inside Echo House? A second tape surfaced. Not from the camera. Not official. It came anonymously, in a plain envelope mailed to a local station, labeled only Echo Session 11. The audio was warped, but two voices were clear. One male, one female. Male, do you remember your name? Female, yes, Mira. Male, and where are you? Female, the Red Room. Male, do you know why? Female, because he wouldn't stay in the script. Male, who? Long pause. Female, 11. Loop 11. The term came back again and again. But who or what was it? Was 11 a person, a subject, or a concept? A few lines deeper in the recording stood out. Female. He still talks through the static. Even after they said he was terminated, he watches us from the screen. Male. There is no screen. Female. Then where's the reflection? Whatever Loop 11 was, it wasn't gone, and it wasn't silent. The official inquiry stalled, but one name kept surfacing in unredacted files. Dr. Kenneth Rells, former neuroscientist, psycholinguistic researcher, last known employer, Arcode Development, 1979 to 1985. Retired, disappeared, never interviewed, until one day, a video leaked, a deposition, private, grainy. Rell sat at a desk, pale and withdrawn, eyes fixed downward. A voice off camera asked, "Did the Echo Project work?" Rells whispered, "Memory is just a song played on the wrong speaker. We taught the song to forget its words." Another question. What is Loop 11? He didn't look up. He just said, Loop 11 was the boy who remembered. And then he unplugged his mic, and the recording ended. Newspapers speculated for weeks. Was there a child subject? Was Marissa protecting him? Was Daniel trying to shut the program down? No one knew. But Ivy Clay, when asked by a private investigator, said something strange. Marissa never wanted kids, but she used to talk in her sleep. She'd say, "Where is he? He's not in the drawing." Back at the dig site, a final structure was uncovered beneath the ruined tunnels. A chamber, round, no doors, and in the center, a chair, small, child-sized, and on the wall, crayons, taped in a neat row, unused, untouched, waiting, and just above the chair, a word scratched into the concrete. 11. Was Loop 11 a person? A child erased from records? A subject who broke free? Or was Loop 11 the program itself? The version that learned to watch its own experiments? To reflect? To remember? Because mirrors remember what faces forget. And this system was built on mirrors. The chamber was small, 8 feet wide, circular. No windows, no light except what crept through the hallway crack. There was no exit, only the way you came in. The chair in the center was clean, too clean, as if someone had wiped it down after the last subject left. Crayons lined the wall, perfectly placed, taped so they wouldn't roll. Each color sharpened down to a nub, unused, untouched, waiting above the chair, carved by hand. Or perhaps fingernail, a single word. 11. Who was 11? A child? A subject? A prototype? Or something else entirely? Dr. Shaw, still working the case privately, believed 11 was the original Loop, not a person, but the first success, the first consciousness to survive total memory erasure and return. The system hadn't failed with 11. It had worked too well. Loop 11 remembered everything. But if that was true, If 11 had escaped, then where did he go? And what did he leave behind? A technician reviewing old data logs from Ransom Cove found something strange. In 2002, 15 years after Daniel and Marissa vanished, a ping was recorded, a transmission, low frequency, only for 3.2 seconds. But embedded in the signal were 2 words, still watching. The location, Elm Hollow, the same beach. The ping matched older transmissions, archived from Echo House experiments in the 1970s. Same cadence, same spacing, same digital signature. Only one subject ever used that phrase in session logs. Subject 11. So if Subject 11 was real, he had survived, and he was watching. The federal inquiry tried to suppress the discovery, but 2 internal memos leaked. One titled, Memory Drift in Long-Term Subjects, Stability Reports, Loop 11. The other, Observation Discontinued, Loop Free. They never meant to release him, but they had. Or maybe he was never meant to stay. A theory emerged. What if Loop 11 wasn't just a subject? What if it was a code, a role passed from person to person, not genetic, programmatic? Whoever remembered too much, whoever broke the loop, became Loop 11, a contagion of memory. And what if that's what happened to Daniel? To Marissa? To Mira? Maybe Daniel was sent to observe her, to keep the system intact, to ensure she didn't remember. But she did, and that's when everything fell apart. Because Mira wasn't just a participant. She was the variable, the one who couldn't be written over. Old drawings found in her storage locker confirmed it. Sketches of the Red Room, of Daniel's face in a mirror, cracked, of a child sitting alone in a room full of eyes, and one disturbing page, a girl standing at the shoreline, waves at her feet, hands outstretched, and behind her, hidden in the ocean foam, a face, barely sketched, eyes blank, mouth open, a child watching. The drawing was dated June 21st, 1987, the day they disappeared. Ivy, in a rare phone interview, said she drew that the night before, said it came to her in a dream, said the boy was calling her back. I thought it was just her artist's imagination. Now I think it was a warning. The deeper they dug, the more twisted the roots became. Because Echo wasn't about healing. It wasn't about trauma. It was about control. Testing the boundaries of the human mind. Seeing how far memory could be stretched before it snapped. And who could survive the break. Dr. Shaw described it best in her notes. Echo doesn't erase. It buries, and what's buried remembers how to dig. In one final unsealed file, pulled from an old maintenance record from Site 3, an engineer noted something disturbing. While cleaning the lower chamber near the Red Room, he heard what he described as breathing, but mechanical, rhythmic, like something waiting behind the wall. He chalked it up to acoustics. But the log ends with one last sentence. Room responds a voice, especially hers. She hums, and it listens. Mira, Marissa, the girl who stayed, the girl who remembered. That's when the theory changed again. What if Mira wasn't protecting 11? What if she was training him? What if the script she repeated wasn't obedience, but a signal, a call to the next loop? The next subject, a message embedded inside routine, hidden in repetition, like a song, too soft to notice until it's stuck in your head, because that's how Echo works. Not through fear, not through force, but through quiet consent. You let it in, you let it stay, you let it right over you. And when you finally question it, when you finally pull back the curtain, you find yourself in a room, a chair, crayons lined against the wall, and the word 11 carved above your head. Not because you're the first, but because you're next. There is a reason the human brain forgets. It isn't a flaw. It's a shield, a mercy, because memory, real memory, doesn't just record. It imprints, burns. It scars the shape of what should never have been known. But the echo system was never designed for mercy. It was designed to overwrite. Back in 1987, when Daniel and Marissa Clay walked into the ocean, they weren't fleeing. They were following instructions. Whether they realized it or not, they were walking home, back to the place they had been before. Because echo wasn't a one-time experiment. It was a loop, not of events, but of people. Old documents recovered from a private research archive revealed something chilling. The Echo Initiative didn't seek volunteers. It recruited them from earlier echo cycles, subjects who had failed to fully forget, those who broke through. Instead of eliminating them, they were reset, sent into new lives, new names, new memories, but always with one flaw left behind, a crack in the mirror. For Daniel, that flaw was curiosity. For Marissa, it was art, both pathways back to the beginning. An internal log from 1982 details what was called cycle drift, when a subject begins to unconsciously seek out the source of their conditioning, draw on the place they once lived, writing names they were never told, dreaming of staircases that don't exist. One such case was Subject 11, a child, age unknown, name unrecorded, referred to only as observer class. His sessions were different. He never forgot, never accepted the loop. He spoke in riddles, quoted words he had never read, repeated things staff members had said hours before. One note written in the margin of a report read, "Loop 11 is not a subject. He is a system echoing back at us." And so they tried something new. They isolated him, locked him in a room. No mirrors, no sound, no people, only walls, crayons, and a single light overhead. They waited for silence, for surrender, but instead he drew, on the walls, on the floor. He drew the rooms he'd never entered, the corridors of Echo House, the names of subjects he'd never met, and in one corner, written 12 times a spiral, "She's coming back. She's coming back. She's coming back." Years later, when Marissa painted those same hallways, without ever having seen them, that's when the whispers started. The staff feared he had infected her, not biologically, not physically, but mentally. The mind, once exposed to full loop, becomes a carrier. And the greatest threat to the system was memory that survived silence. By the mid-1990s, Echo was dismantled. Officially, the sites closed, the subjects scattered, the programs sealed away under layers of redacted bureaucracy, but the loops remained, living in the minds of those who had been processed, reset, released. It wasn't about locations. It never was. It was about people and the songs they carried with them. In 2015, a new report emerged from a sleep disorder clinic in upstate New York. A woman had come in with night terrors. She said she kept waking up to the sound of static and a voice whispering, "Don't come out until the clock stops ticking." When asked what she saw in the dream, she described a red door, a hallway lit by bulbs, a chair, a name carved in the ceiling. 11. She had never heard of Echo, never seen the documentaries, had no internet access. But in her blood work, traces of a synthetic compound were found, a neurochemical variant, similar to the one found in Caroline Whitmore's spinal fluid, the Echo strain. Dr. Shaw, still working quietly from her home in Oregon, saw the report, and in her private notebook, she wrote, "The loops were never closed, just paused. and 11 was the key left in the lock. If 11 wasn't a person anymore, but a signal, then any survivor could become a transmitter, carrying fragments of the loop, activating it in others, spreading memory like a virus. Marissa's final paintings, the ones Ivy kept hidden in a private vault, showed this idea clearly. One canvas, massive, unframed, unfinished. It was a spiral. At first, just shapes. But the closer you looked, the more it revealed. Rooms, faces, clocks, doors. A girl walking into water. And at the center, not a person, but an eye, open, watching. In 2016, that painting was stolen, never recovered. But 6 months later, an anonymous envelope was sent to a local museum in Charleston. Inside, a single photograph, blurry, shot through glass. But it showed the painting, hanging in a room, and beneath it, a chair. And in that chair, a child, not facing the camera, but staring up at the canvas, as if it remembered. That image was never verified, but it circulated across dark forums, and always with the same caption. The loop never ends. It just changes face. Daniel's whereabouts remain unknown. No new sightings. No credit history. No activity. But one source claimed he was seen in Europe, watching a gallery exhibit from a distance, one that featured artists who had never lived in Echo House, but had painted it anyway. In Ivy's last public statement, she said, "My sister didn't just remember. She was remembered by the system. Like it knew where she was. Like it was waiting for her to activate again. Because memory is a door. And once opened, you never forget which hallway led you there. The seer remembers, even when the world forgets. Even when files are shredded, and towns are buried, and names are scrubbed from the record, the seer remembers. It carries the weight of things drowned but not dead. And sometimes, on nights with no wind, it returns them. In the fall of 2017, just 3 years after the discovery of the steel camera and the letter from Mira, a storm hit Elm Hollow. Not a hurricane, not a flood, just a strange wind, strong enough to tear through dunes and expose what had long been hidden. When the sand settled, the locals found the hatch again, the one that led down, the one that had been sealed after the FBI investigation. Only now, it was open. Officials arrived the next morning, but no footprints were found, no sign of forced entry, just a door swinging slightly in the breeze. The tunnels had collapsed after the last excavation, or so they thought, but somehow the central chamber, the red room, was intact, and on the floor, in a corner once covered in soot and ash, there was a chair, old, cracked, and resting on it, a single photograph. It was a picture of Marissa, not from the 1980s, not from the wedding, from now, older, tired, but unmistakable. She was standing in front of the sea, wearing a white coat, hair tied back, and behind her, just barely visible through the fog, a boy, not looking at her, looking at the camera. It was time-stamped August 3rd, 2017, exactly 30 years and 43 days after she vanished. No one could explain it, but the FBI reopened the case. Again, that same week, Ivy Clay received a package. No return address, no postage, just a shoebox left on her porch. Inside, a child's drawing, a Polaroid, a broken watch. The drawing was simple. Crayon lines, shaky hands. It showed a spiral. At the center, a figure. Eyes open, arms out, and around it, written again and again in uneven script. She remembered, she remembered, she remembered. The Polaroid was darker, blurry, but it showed a hallway. not in the tunnels. Somewhere newer. Clean walls, white lights, and at the end, a mirror. In the mirror, a reflection, not of the hallway, but of a room full of clocks. The broken watch was old, rusty, still set to 7 a.m., just like the phrase mirror repeated on tape. It's 7 a.m. The water is calm. I made tea. Ivy said nothing to the press. But in her journal, found later by researchers, she wrote, "It's starting again, but not where we left it. Somewhere new, somewhere clean." Dr. Shaw, now in her 60s, visited the beach herself that winter. She stood at the shoreline, closed her eyes, and heard it, not the wind, not the waves, but a whisper, begin restoration, memory anchor engaged. She turned. No one was there, but on the shore behind her, drawn in the sand, a spiral, and next to it, the word, 11. 1 month later, a hospital worker in coastal Virginia reported something strange. A child had been dropped off, no ID, no guardian, said his name was Tommy. He was quiet, didn't speak much, but drew, always drawing, rooms, mirrors, stairs. When asked where he lived, he said, "In the Loop, but the door stuck now." The doctors thought it was trauma, but one nurse recognized the drawings. She had grown up in Elm Hollow, and once, as a teenager, snuck into the red chamber before it was shut down. She never forgot the spiral, the eye, the chair. She swore the boy had never been inside Echo, but somehow he remembered it. They took blood samples, found strange neuroprotein markers, synthetic, the same kind identified in Caroline Whitmore in 2007, the same Echo strain. But Tommy's brain scans were different. Where others showed memory gaps, Tommy showed mirrored activity, as if his mind was playing two lives at once. One here, one buried. In his sleep, he whispered names, not in fear. In routine, Marissa, Daniel, Mira, 11. Every night, he drew a clock. Same time, 7 o'clock. But one day, he changed it. Hand set to 12:11. When asked why, he said, "Because that's when she'll open the door again." And that's when Dr. Shaw realized what the system had done. It hadn't just looped memory. It had transferred it, carried fragments from one subject to another, layering them, repeating them, until someone broke through. The system wasn't a cage. It was a conduit, and Tommy was the newest receiver. Later that spring, a girl in Ohio reported night terrors. Said she kept seeing a red room, a boy in a chair. The same week, an elderly woman in Arizona wrote the word echo over 400 times in her notebook. She had never been to the East Coast, had no known connection to the project. But when her granddaughter saw the spiral drawing, she said, "That's the dream, the one Nana draws in her sleep." This was no longer a mystery. It was a pattern, a memory that wouldn't die. And in the center of it all, still unseen, still unnamed, Loop 11, watching, learning, growing. It had escaped the red room, moved beyond the beach. And now it was waiting for someone to hear the song, to repeat the script, to pick up the crayon, to open the door. There is a moment right before memory returns, when the world stands still. You forget your name, your voice, your place, and then something cracks. A line splits through the silence, and suddenly you remember everything, not as it was, but as it always had been. In the summer of 2018, something shifted. The dreams became more frequent, the drawings more consistent. Children across the country, none of them connected, began sketching the same thing: a chair, a spiral, A red room. Doctors dismissed it. Parents laughed it off. But one urologist in Vermont saw a pattern. He layered the sketches from 3 different states, overlaid them, and they matched. Not close, exact, not random memory, shared memory. That was when the phrase surfaced again in separate reports across different cities. Don't come out until the clock stops ticking. Sometimes whispered, sometimes written, but always the same. Loop 11 wasn't spreading like a disease. It was blooming, because that's what memory does when it's buried for too long. It doesn't decay. It seeds. And when the conditions are right, it grows back. That fall, Ivy Clay received one final envelope. She didn't open it right away. She was tired, worn down. She'd moved again. No interviews, no calls. But curiosity never leaves you, especially when you've lived beside an echo for half your life. Inside the envelope, a single page, typed, not handwritten. The font used by the Echo House typewriter, verified by an archivist who had once held the original models. The letter was short. We called it Loop 11 because the 11th subject didn't forget. He absorbed the others. He built a mirror. She was a reflection. And you were the silence. No signature. No return address. But it was postmarked from a city Ivy had never visited. A city her sister once painted, years before she vanished. She checked the painting again. And in the corner, behind a gray window, she saw it. A spiral. Tiny. Almost hidden. But there. She didn't sleep that night. And at 3:17 a.m., her security camera caught her standing outside, barefoot, facing east, and whispering something no audio system could capture. The next morning, she was gone. No sign of struggle. Door unlocked. Shoes by the door. Only one item missing from the house. A spiral sketch taped to her fridge. Authorities never reopened her case, but investigators close to the Echo program marked the file. Subject Clay, unlooked transmission event. Flagged. Across the coast near Elm Hollow, the tides changed again. Not metaphorically. Literally. Beach erosion increased. Shoreline shifted. And the hatch, the one buried, then opened, then sealed, was found cracked again. Not by weather. By design. Inside, the red room was empty. But a trail of sand led deeper, into tunnels once believed collapsed. They weren't. They'd been rebuilt. Not by machines. By hand. And at the end of the corridor, a new door. Metal. Clean. Recently welded. And beside it, in chalk, she is memory. He is reflection. You are next. Cameras stopped working beyond the threshold, but an operative sent in for exploration claimed he heard breathing, and in the dark, humming, a lullaby. No one dared go further. The hatch was resealed, but a microphone left behind captured a final phrase. A child's voice, barely a whisper. Loop 11 is still learning. Dr. Shaw died 6 months later. Natural causes. In her home, among her journals, researchers found one final note. We made a mirror, but forgot to break it. Daniel Clay was never seen again, but his name reappeared in one strange place. A manuscript sent to a fringe publisher in Denmark. It arrived anonymously. No title, just a 387-page document filled with prose, drawings, and a single theme. Echo. Every page whispered different truth, but the final sentence stayed the same. When the red door opens, the spiral begins again. That's when people started whispering about the second cycle. If Echo 1 had ended with the collapse of Ransom Cove, what if Echo 2 had already begun? Not in bunkers, not in red rooms, but in classrooms, offices, homes, in minds unaware they were repeating the same script. Waking at 7 a.m., making tea, repeating the day, looping, just like Mira. And one theory, the most disturbing, said this: Loop 11 didn't escape the system. It became the system. It doesn't need walls, or wires, or red lights. Just routine, just silence, just you, because the most dangerous kind of prison is the one that feels like home. In one final report before her death, Dr. Shaw said, "I believe Loop 11 is a number. It's a stage, a point in memory where forgetting fails. And once you reach it, the system doesn't erase you. It watches. That's why survivors go silent, why they vanish, not because they are taken, but because they see what's on the other side of the door. And when they do, they don't want to come back. There is no key, no map, no rescue, just a spiral, a mirror, and a voice. She remembered. He recorded. You will repeat. It ends where it began. A beach, a breeze, a sky that never learned to forget, and silence that listens back. On the shoreline of Elm Hollow, the waves continue, indifferent, endless, but beneath the sand, beneath memory itself, the loop remains, waiting, watching. The Clay disappearance is now considered archivally closed, not solved, not dismissed, just placed in a drawer labeled unresolvable, a term used only for cases so steeped in contradiction that no further investigation is deemed possible. But unresolvable isn't the end. It's the mirror turned to face the wall. In the final interview ever recorded with Ivy Clay, just weeks before she vanished, she said something strange. People ask me if Marissa died. I don't know how to answer that. She left, but she's still here. I feel her when I forget something important, when I walk into a room and don't know why. She lives in the gaps. Maybe that's what Echo was trying to map, the silence between our thoughts. Researchers later coined a phrase, cognitive bleeding, when memory structures, not biological but constructed, leak from one mind into another, like stories, like fears, like songs you don't remember learning. And sometimes you loop without knowing it. You wake, you walk, you work, you sleep, and one day you stop, you sit at the window, and a thought you didn't know you had arrives. I've been here before. In a closed case report filed by a junior analyst who cataloged the Echo archives, a line was scribbled in the margin. What if Loop 11 isn't spreading? What if it's always been here, waiting for the right mind to remember it? Across the country, strange things have surfaced. A child who sings the same 4 lines every night in his sleep. A woman who draws spirals over and over, not knowing she was born just miles from Ransom Cove. A teacher who starts her classes each morning by saying, "The water is calm," without realizing why. None of them know each other, but all of them echo. And one theory, whispered only by those who studied the program up close, is this: Loop 11 is not a person. It's a position, the last node in the network, the reflection at the edge of memory, the one who survives forgetting. Because someone always survives, even in broken systems, even when the wires are cut, the signal reroutes. A satellite image captured in 2021, taken purely by accident, showed a shape in the sand dunes of Elm Hollow, a perfect spiral, gone by morning. But one hiker that same week claimed to have seen a man walking the beach at dusk, alone, barefoot, carrying nothing, and humming. When asked to describe him, she said, "He looked like he remembered something he wasn't supposed to." The town no longer mentions the Clay case. Too many layers. Too much pain. But every year, on June 21st, the water is unusually still. as if waiting. In the ruins of Echo House, one room remains untouched. No walls, just stone and silence. In the center, etched in the floor, she remembered, he recorded, you will repeat. And beneath it, a chair, still facing the dark. It is said that if you sit long enough, you start to hear the loops. First faint, then clearer, a voice that might be yours. It's 7 a.m. The water is calm. I made tea. But it isn't you. It never was. It's the memory behind your memory. The one that writes your thoughts before you speak them. The one that hums while you're trying to sleep. The one that waits in the corners of your routine, watching. So what really happened to Daniel and Marissa Clay? The truth is simple. They remembered too much, asked the wrong questions, broke the loop, and for that, the system buried them. Not in the ground, in history. But memory does not stay buried. It unspools. It whispers. It returns. And someday, someone else will feel that weight, will trace the spiral, will pick up the crayon, open the red door, and realize they've been here before. Because echo is not a place. It's not a person. It's a pattern. And it always ends the same way. With silence that remembers,